Chris, how's it going, man?
Good. How are you?
Dude, I'm doing really, really well. Stoked to have you here.
Nice. I'm happy to be here.
So, I've known you for a while, and I've always liked bouncing ideas off you, and kind of loved what you do, and kind of love the whole brain game that you and I play when we talk and stuff. So now I know you've worked like in the military, and you did that for a while, like a private contractor, and then. And it was basically all around mental toughness. And you did that, I think, for over a decade, right?
Yeah, I'm still doing it. It's just changed over the years with like who I'm working with. So,
But it is based around all this mental toughness. Is like that's your main thing, and that's what I mean. That's what I love to talk about.
yep. Yeah, it's all based in like sports psychology. So instead of sports, it's like, I guess, probably more important things, when it's with the military, people's lives can be on the line, and just making good decisions and thinking clearly and being able to perform at your best when maybe there's a lot on the line.
So what is it that brings about in this mental toughness, and why is it so important, I guess I would say, to have mental toughness? Because I mean, if everyone hears the word mental toughness, like, we know it sounds like, oh, I want to be mentally tough, but like, what is it? Like, what is when Chris says it, the guy that teaches mental toughness, is a little bit different than your average Joe saying it. So what is it?
Well, it's funny because I don't know, people look at me and you think of mental toughness, you think of like David Goggins and these like hard people. Yeah. And then I get up and I'm teaching about mental toughness and I'm not that guy, right?
Right.
And I think, to me, mental toughness is two words. It's alignment and control. And that's it. And I think that a lot of problems arise when you just think that mental toughness is this like hard thing, and it's almost like aggressive and angry, because not everybody wants that, but everybody can be mentally tough. And so if it's just alignment and control, it means, am I aligned with what, like, my trajectory, like where I want to go,
what I'm trying to pull off? Is my brain dialed in for that?
Yeah. And sometimes it has to do with like relationships and having good conversations, and difficulties with maybe even, I don't know, we both have teenage boys.
Yeah.
Like, right? And so that might be one form of mental toughness, where for somebody else, it might be running 100 miles, and it's two totally different things,
right,
but yet it's both alignment and control. I also work with a lot of sales guys, and it's the same thing, is just like, how can I stay aligned with this thing? And oftentimes that I decided a long time ago, but right now it sucks and it's hard. And so how do I keep aligned with that?
Right.
When right now it's just like extra difficult.
Right. So what are one of those key things that starts kind of peeling the brain back and opens it up for this kind of change? Because I know it's like there's so many steps to this unraveling of the human experience. Right. And I always say, like, baby steps. So what's someone that says, okay, I want to start thinking in this direction. I really want to evaluate my life, look at myself as an avatar, step back and say, what are one of the simple steps to really be open to this mental toughness thing, to really be like, okay, how am I going to start? So where's your starting point in the brain game for someone that's like a novice at this?
Yeah, the starting point is really just paying attention. And I think that a lot of times I mean, it's the difference between humans and animals, right? An animal is just like focused on here and now, and like, I need to eat, right? It's all just survival.
Savage.
And which is a great thing, and it's a great helpful way to live. The problem with people is that we can think about the future, right? We could like project into the future, which causes all these problems of anxiety, doubt, fear, insecurities. And so if you can kind of learn to let go of that and pay attention to like what you've got going on with your current situation,
correct,
then you'll have a lot less of the issues, right, that tend to cause the problems. And so And it's funny because there's kind of two sides to it, right? There's how can I prevent, I guess, the hard stuff from happening. And when I say hard stuff, really it's your own physiological responses to things.
So it's like you're just, so what you're saying is maybe the first step would be like really getting into a true sense of awareness.
Yeah.
So being really, really aware and say, okay, I'm going to evaluate myself. It's this inner conversation of I need to be aware of the now.
Yep.
And how do I factor in everything that I'm trying to become? And then kind of something like that.
Yeah, and you have the trajectory, but you at the same time let go of the trajectory and realize that my results are going to be a byproduct of my actions. And if I focus on the result, I'm probably not going to get it. But if I focus on the actions, then I probably will. Huge. And so there's a moment where you have to decide, like, this is the direction I'm going. Right. But then after you make that decision, then all the focus needs to be on like, okay, so I've committed to that, but these are the steps right now. In fact, step 2 doesn't matter. All that matters is step 1. Yeah. And so if you can just focus on step 1.
Yeah. It's almost letting consequences handle themselves. Like I think too many times people get so caught up in the what ifs that they don't come back and say, look, stay focused on the here and now. Whatever steps you've outlined or someone has outlined in their life, and it gets so easy to get caught up in the consequences down the road, like if, or what if, and we don't take the time to just zero in and get like myopic on that one little step 1, step 2, right, going down the line. So that's
it's
huge.
Almost like step one, right? It's like okay, so I did step 1, erase that's gone already,
then
and
muscle
now I have
memory.
a new step. And the problem is this is not normal for people. Like we're people, not animals, and so it doesn't come naturally. And so naturally we think about the future and all the problems, and so that's why it's normal for people to feel insecure and for to doubt, because the consequences matter.
Yeah, and stepping into the unknown, like stepping into the unknown is one thing that is people don't like. No, I mean, it seems like, and we'll talk about comfortability for 2 seconds, but I always look at it like we're almost taught from such a young age to just constantly seek for comfortability. Don't do that, you might get hurt. Don't get hurt. Don't get hurt. Don't get hurt. Don't get hurt. And that's like a brain track in our minds. And then you get to an adult, and it's like, oh, I don't want to do anything that there's risk, fear, like, right?
Well, being comfortable limits your ability. Like if you think of a kid climbing a tree and their parents are like, oh, don't climb the tree, then that kid will lose the ability to climb a tree, right? And so the same thing is true whether we're talking about trees, we're talking about talking to people. Like there's kids that, would live on their phones, and so they can't have a conversation with somebody, right? I'd rather text them, and it's because they've lost the ability because that's not
fear
comfortable.
Run it. Yeah, and then it's like they're almost taught from a young age to live in fear.
Yeah.
Almost like it's just ingrained into our society, like, oh, fear.
And fear is not a bad thing. Like I think there's 2 extremes when it comes to fear. One is what we're talking about, right? Fear so I don't do anything. And then there's the people that live in fear because they're insane and like always pushing themselves, right? You think of like Kai Lenny and these people that are just like
extreme humans.
Yeah. And both are living in fear, but yet both are living 2 very extremely different lives, different experiences.
Yeah. And it's almost like there's certain levels of fear that are reality based, and then they're like almost made up in our minds.
Yeah.
And I often say like we're the writer, director, and actor of our own movie. And so we're creating these big giant monsters in the room.
Yeah.
But on to like, okay, so awareness, what are some other things that are like really good tools to break down that self-awareness and get started on this journey towards mental toughness?
Yeah, there's a lot out there on awareness, right? Mindfulness and meditation.
Or just what other tools? If we were to say awareness is here, are there 3 steps? Like, because I remember when you did your thing, you drew the diagram on, and it's like, okay, you've now, I would look at awareness like, okay, I've now put the white belt on, so to speak, and I'm in the dojo.
Yeah.
Like, I'm here to accept this journey. What are my next steps?
I would say the first thing is shut stuff off. Like, get used to being with yourself. Because if you're going to do anything like, I don't know, that's difficult, right? So whether that's in business, in sales, sports, like anything, like there's going to be times when you have to just be you and what you're doing. And people hate that. People hate, they fill their mind with, they fill the white space with podcasts and they have music and good things. But like, if you have too much good stuff, then it's not good anymore. And so, like,
waters down the information.
Yeah,
a little bit, probably.
Silence. Like,
so what are
silence?
What are some things that you do? Like, what are some of those things to really like get into your home state and really like you were saying, detach? How are you detaching yourself?
Yeah, well, okay, so there's different ways. So if we're just talking about a person who's trying to like kind of step into this world of like gaining control and figuring out alignment, like just start creating opportunities. Like on your commute to work, don't turn anything on. Like just drive to work and pay attention to the thoughts that you have and start to track and see the kind of the thought habits that you have and the thought patterns. Like we're creatures of habit, and so we think in circles. Find out what those are. For me, I think I find time to do that. You know, I love surfing, and so it's always good to like go and do something physical and have that moment. But I also think it's great to like, I don't know, wind down at the end of the day without anything on, and, you know, kids are in bed, and just like be, you know, have conversations with people and look people in the eye, and don't try to think about the answers while they're talking, and just like be present and be with yourself. And I think that's probably going to be like the starting point for anyone.
Almost like listening to the calmness and really seeking out a place where there's not all this digital confusion and noise. And you're basically suggesting, hey, listen to yourself. Don't listen to anybody. Tune everything out and really have some inner conversation at a quiet time. Maybe even the wilderness, like, because you're mentioning this. I think every Wednesday I go on an 8-mile march in the mountains. And that's my Whisper Wednesday. And I'm out just literally looking at the goats, and you know what I mean? I'm like, literally, I can hear the wind blowing through the trees, and I'm quiet. I don't have any music, no like, you know, no digital footprint, just totally aware and listening to all the surround sounds.
And I imagine you get a lot of benefits, one, of just like having that experience, but I would assume that you probably have a ton of enlightenment also, and answers, and, you know, people that believe in God, like, I'm sure God speaks to you during those times, right? And I think he's trying to speak to us all the time, that we just don't, we miss out on so many opportunities because we're just like filling that void with other things. But I think for a lot of people that don't have that kind of experience and don't create those opportunities regularly, it's going to be hard. Yeah. Like, they're going to have 5 minutes of silence and they're going to be like, it's been an hour. And it's just like, I'm
going nuts.
And so that's the one side, right? Is kind of stepping in and just seeing where things go. The other side that I imagine a lot of, you know, people listening probably have goals. They have objectives. They know like there's a path. And I think that there's also a side of that where you start to hear the doubts. You start to hear the insecurity, the fear, right? And this provides an opportunity for you to now say, like, okay, I know what's going on in here, and I don't have to listen. Right. I can hear those thoughts and do something different. I can hear those thoughts and still make my own decisions. And so, like, for one, if you're just starting out, then create silence, right?
Right.
But if you're already kind of on a path and you know like where you're going, start listening.
Do you ever like on the positivity note? Because I mean, just as an individual, you have around 100,000 thoughts a day, and I often get into this with people and say, "Do you realize 80% of them are negative?" So, at this time, do you ever step into that realm and teach someone and say, like, what are some of the steps you teach that in this quiet space? Okay, there's rules. So, are there rules in this quiet time? Is there any suggestions that you can give someone to say, "Hey, look, this is what's coming, and then this is how you combat it"?
Right. That is a fascinating question. I think it depends on what the objective of the silence is. For a lot of people starting out, I think that the objective should be to quiet the mind, right? And so, I mean, and there's, I guess there's kind of one, listen, but also just like, can you shut it off? There's all those thoughts.
Right.
Can you get them to slow down?
Calm the gerbils down.
Right.
All these little gerbils in your brain, I always call it. Like, how do you stop them?
Yeah. And you stop it by paying attention to one thing, right? And that's why people say, focus on your breath, right?
Right.
Focus on your breathing.
100%.
And then that enables all those other thoughts to go quiet, right? Or focus on, you can do like some body work where you're paying attention and, flexing and letting go right? And just being mindful of like one specific thing. But let's say that you have something specific you're like training for. Like I've got this friend that does like these 100-mile runs.
Right.
And so that's going to be way different. Like what the training of the mind for a 100-mile run, or if you're training to speak to a group, or if you're in sales, right? Like there are different performances, if you will, that we have that we can practice. Right? And we have, I don't know, in the sports psych world, it's called IZOF. It stands for Individual Zone of Optimal Functioning. It basically means that as people, we're all unique, we're all different. And like how you might need to be to like show up and be your best at a specific thing is probably different than me. Like I love watching this in surfing. Surfing's one of the sports that you see so much of like their warm-ups, and they'll show them, because they're just like sitting on the beach.
And they're all different.
Yeah, and you might have somebody that's doing jumping jacks, and then somebody else that's, getting all zen, and they're trying to get into their individual zone of optimal functioning.
So it's like almost their personal, like roadmap to getting into their own state of flow. Like, what is my optimal flow state, and what is my ritual to get there? Yeah,
exactly. Like, it's funny because, so I've learned all this, I got my master's and all that stuff. And then I look back in my past, like before any of that, like in high school, I swam. And right before, coach is like, all right, you're up next. And it's like 2 minutes, I'm on. And I would go and I would just like hold the fence, look off into like the parking lot. And I would close my eyes at first, and I would just kind of bounce my head, and I would start singing, "She's as cold as ice, dun-dun-dun." Why that song? I don't know.
But it doesn't matter because it got you into flow.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I'm not intense. It made me laugh at myself, and it took the nerves away.
Yeah.
But it also increased my energy. So it's weird. It decreased my nervous energy, but increased my fun energy. And nice. I felt like I was just like, it's playtime. And so for me, playtime was like insane. And then we had this meet that was super important, and coach was like all aggro, stop screwing around. And so he stopped me from doing that. And that meet, I ended up
and that's when you didn't
defaulting.
Do well.
It was so swimming. They're like, take your mark,
right,
and then boop, and anyway. I jumped the gun. Time was going faster for me, and so what was the normal time? Like, take your mark, boop, felt.
And that was all because you got out of your rhythm.
I was out of my rhythm, and so I ended up jumping in the pool, and everybody else is just sitting there, and then I was disqualified.
Off of that, so getting in a state of flow and getting in this optimal state. So right now, we've talked about awareness. We kind of like talked about, getting into a zone where you're flying. What are some of the pitfalls? Like, what are some of the things when someone starts out, they're like, okay, I'm ready for this. I'm in the dojo. I'm ready to start training my mind.
Yep.
What are some of the things that stop people from taking that next step, or even getting involved and saying, hey, you know what? Because there's a lot of people that give up. There's a lot of people that like are just like, yeah, and they don't ever make that jump. And like, what is it? What are some of those things that are blocking people and keeping them from really making a move?
Well, I think that there's a lot of comparison that happens. I think that people and it's natural, it's normal for people, but we compare ourselves so much. And we also try to mimic and copy people, which is great to do. But if you are just trying to like copy other people and you don't know yourself, then what's going to happen typically, right? If we're going back to the eyes off thing, is like you don't know what works for you. So you're trying to do what works for somebody else. And then you're not getting the same result. And so you're like, well, I suck and they're awesome. And so then people give up a lot of the time, right? That's when those fears, those doubts, the insecurities all start getting really loud and really strong. And so then, like, of course you're giving up. Like, you're not even thinking about what you want. You're just thinking about what other people are having that you don't.
So what do you do when you hit that? So you're like, because people make the decision. They're like, okay, I'm ready for this. I'm ready to make extreme change in my life. I'm ready to be tough. I'm ready to overcome addiction. I'm ready to change my financial situation. I'm ready to take my life. Like, a lot of people, like, they hit rock bottom and they're like, hey, I'm ready for change.
Yeah.
And then they take 3 steps forward and they feel all good. And they hit a little bit of that, like, oh, that guy over there is so good, or that girl over there is so good, or whatever it might be. And then they're boom, boom, boom. They're 4 steps back. So what is it that can create more of a steady rhythm forward? What are some of those pitfalls that you can like be aware of so that you can get through them? What would you say is one of the, how do you recognize that? Like, how do you say, wait a minute, step back. This is what this is. I know how this game ends. What am I going to do here? I got a decision to make.
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to values and integrity. Like, and a lot of have been doing things to get something, and so they might not even be aware of their values, right? Like what's important to them. And I think people need to get to the point that where win, lose, or draw, this is who I am and this is what I'm gonna do. Doesn't matter if you win. Like, I will tell the truth, right? If that's one of your values. And so if you know your values and you are clear and that is what matters most, like, then the actions moving forward will be clear. And I think what happens too is a lot of people, they see that they want to make change. They see that, like, okay, if I continue down this path, it's not going to be good.
Right.
But they're like, well, I don't know what to do. Like, what do I even do differently? How do I change? And so I think part of it's knowing the answers. But then I think another huge part, even before that, is people just don't know who they are. People don't know what their values are. How can you have any integrity if you don't even have anything guiding you?
Yeah, I always wonder how often people have whiteboarded their life. Like, how often have you sat down on the white piece of paper and said, this is who I am? Like, everything down to the nut and bolt. Like,
right.
I am a person that has these traits. This is, if I were to say I am 20 times, what would be I am in the next word? And when you get to all 20 things, you would be able to evaluate, what that is.
Yeah. Well, and when people do finally get to that point, maybe they, I don't know, join a program or something. Somebody sits them down. They're like, you're not leaving until you do this. Are they even honest?
Right.
Like, are they writing down the actual, like, truthful answers to those questions?
That they actually feel in here.
Well, and if you're like, who am I is often different than who do I want to be.
Right.
Right. And so you might have somebody fill that out and it might just be really sucky. Like, it might be hard. It might be stuff that they don't want to write down, but is true. And I think a lot of people get to that place where you may need to face that before you can make a new list of like, this is who I want to be.
Yeah, because it's coupled with that. It's like, this is who I am, being brutally honest. This is who I am. Yep. And I got to evaluate that. And then you get to the other side of the page and it's like, this is where I want to go. So what are some of the things that I can do that would make this where I want to go, the version of me? And so do you do like what's one, before I ask this, pose it as that. Do you ever do that where you do teach someone in mental toughness in your type of curriculum to where they imagine, is there any imagining yourself as someone better or different so that imagination can come out of someone? How do you see that as a trait?
Yeah, I think using your imagination, like, making it as vivid as possible is super valuable. And people have a hard time doing that. A lot of times they see it and then immediately followed by a list of why they can't, and all the problems
starts coming in. Yeah,
exactly.
What do you think? What do you think probably is the most impactful like trait, or like the most impactful thing out of all this in mental toughness? What's the number one mental toughness thing to have? That's a tough one. I mean, zeroing in on the target.
I know, like just one. I mean, stick to stuff. Like, keep doing things. Like people don't commit anymore. And if you can, I mean, if you look at like research, right? You got Angela
what are you
Duckworth
seeing with that? Like I think that's a huge thing you bring up. What are you seeing? Where are you seeing people, like, are they just giving up along the way, or are they just?
I think it starts with kids. Like, we're teaching our kids that it's okay to stop doing stuff. Okay, sign up for soccer, and some people don't
like it anymore.
So I think it starts there. But like, if you're gonna do an art class, like, finish it. If you're gonna get to the finish line. The research shows 2 years. Like, if you're gonna play baseball, like, you commit for 2 years. Not that it's about baseball, but like, that's what the research shows, that like, if you can't commit to something for 2 years, then you lack grit.
So that 2 year mark is basically the mark where someone says, I set out to do something, and their DNA or their mental side that gives them confidence when accomplishing things, like everything from waking up and making your bed in the morning. Like, we all know that builds confidence. One little simple thing, having these little morning micro habits that are really cool for success.
Yep.
So what you're saying is, look, the 2 year mark is the mark where you say, if I decide to stop doing what I'm doing, I feel like, you know what? I gave it my all. I went to the point where I could say,
right,
I did this.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But at the same time, did you really? Like, okay, yeah, you can go through the motions for 2 years, but not really actually do stuff. So I think that there is, in addition to, like, sure, okay, somebody, Angela Duckworth, she's the one that's done all this research on grit.
Right.
And okay, so there's this number, 2 years, like, cool, just like the 10,000 hours to master.
Right, to be a master.
I think that at the end of the day, it's not just about, okay, do something for 2 years. It's like, what's actually happening in that 2 years? Like, there's got to be some deliberate practice. There's got to be some actual, like, specifics that happens. So it's, persistence, but stick to stuff is probably the biggest thing that I see that people aren't doing.
Yeah, and there's probably a little bit of intuition in there where it's like, okay, I'm not on the fence with what I'm doing here. I kind of have a real strong sense in here that I've done all I can do right here. And it's not basically, because I talk about decision making, whether it's a fear-based decision, like truly based out of anxiety and fear, versus a calmness of like, I can really feel this is the right decision, whether it's to stop or to shift gears or to turn left or turn right or go straight or whatever it might be, is there's huge emotions in decision making.
Huge.
Right? I mean, have you not seen that I mean, prison systems are full of people great people who in a moment of passion, right, just made one little mistake thinking they knew what was what. My dad has a famous quote, and he's like, don't tell me worry doesn't work. I worry about a lot of things that never happens. But there's a lot of people who worry about something, and then they make a decision out of that worry, and they look back and go, oh, that wasn't what I thought it was.
Yeah.
Right?
When I think a lot of people also don't actually know how to really, like you talked about that piece, like to really make a decision based on that piece, and this is the right decision, like regardless of what the outcome is, this is what I'm committing to. I think what happens more often is we rationalize and justify our behavior because it's not comfortable anymore, or we don't want to do it. And so we can justify. We're so smart. Like people are so smart at justifying anything. Like,
right.
And I think that it's this, it's that gray area that a lot of people just don't actually know how to step back enough to say, like, okay, am I just making stuff up because I don't want to do this anymore? Or is this actually the right decision?
Yeah, you say something like, based on what the outcome is. I can tell you, because like I've been a roofer for years, I own a construction company, and like in the early days of my career, I would get so excited about a job, and I would be turning in an estimate, and I would be like, no, that's too much. Oh, that's not enough. And I would get into this game, like, what if I get the job? What if I don't? And after being in the industry and owning multiple businesses and getting to the point where I was okay without like bidding on certain jobs or putting myself in a pool in an industry, and when I was negotiating, being okay with my negotiations, that like when I would submit an estimate now, and I only go after projects where I know that I can do a great job for this person and I am comfortable with the price, and I know that if I don't get it, I'm okay both ways. And it seems like my brain and my ability to make judgment calls on the numbers and really feel it is like, it's so much better. And it's like, you don't worry about it. Like if you get the job, great. If you don't, great. Right. But you're not in this wonderment of how things are going to turn out. And it's a wonderful space to be in, is to understand that if you can make decisions being absolutely okay with whatever happens, 100%, then I think that you can make decisions that are a little bit less fear-based and make them a little bit more accurate on your intuition, because a lot of decision-making is intuition.
Well, but you can't have accurate intuition if you don't have accurate values, right? Like it ties back to that. Like your intuition is going to be based on your environment if you don't have values and like boundaries and rules in place. Like it sounds like you have, and whether it's like conscious and you have them written down of like, we only take these jobs and this is our process for going through, the bidding, right? When you know that, everything becomes easier. You're like, okay, well, it doesn't match this, so we're moving on.
Well, on the values things, what if someone, you've got a kid, he grows up in a broken home, lives on the street. I think we all have a sense of right and wrong. I really don't think, I think anyone that's involved in the human experience that's walking around here having this thing called mortality, walking around like, come on. Yeah, I don't care if you're born into the worst home in the world or whatever abuses took place. There is some type of awareness of right and wrong. Yeah. But how does someone hone in your mind? How does someone hone in on their values and say, look, this is my values. This is who I am as a person. Is that an inner conversation? Is that a moment that someone sits down and writes it down and says, hey, these are my values, and this is my creed, or this is my code of conduct? I got my ideas, but I would love to hear, like, what do you think? How can someone strap themselves and really tighten the screws down and say, look, this is who I am. These are my values.
Yeah.
Well,
before they can do that, I think a lot of people just have a problem with, or they think that values are something you find. Like, just decide, you choose. There's nobody, like, it's not something that they have this like sword in the stone moment of,
There's no kumbaya.
Harry Potter, this is your wand chose you. Like, make a decision that pick one. This is one value that at the end of the day, this is one thing I'm not bending on.
Right.
Like, and just make a decision and then put yourself in situations where, all right, you got to choose. Do I set that value aside or do I actually follow through with it? And so I think that's where a lot of the problems arise, is that people think that like, oh, I need to find my value. Like, no, wherever you're currently at, choose. And choose, and it doesn't have to be a lot. Like, choose one, choose two. And then your life will come to a point where maybe you come to a fork in the road and it's like, okay, in this circumstance or this situation, maybe it is time to change values.
Right.
But like if you're just living where every situation is like, well, I don't know, like your life's going to be really hard and it's not going to be very enjoyable, and you're not going to be able to stand up for yourself and say like, no, this is my value. So people have to learn how to make a decision. And I think also you got to realize that it's practice. Like you have to like go through the motions and do it.
Keep going.
Yeah. And so if it means writing stuff down, like, awesome, do that. But if you're going to do it and maybe it's a struggle, then practice it, which means like, I don't know, they say practice makes perfect, but I learned young in my career that practice makes permanent and that we're always practicing. And so like every time you do something, you're building muscle memory, you're building neural pathways, right? And it's making it more and more permanent. And so you have to realize that if you want to do things different, then you got to practice doing it differently. So if you want to develop a value that maybe it's important to you, but you don't actually do it, then write it down every day and you're going to practice it every single day and you're going to get more and more reps in and you'll make it more and more permanent.
So we've talked a little bit about like people getting started and all that stuff. You know, with me, I'm a brain game guy and I am absolutely stoked on the things I'm trying to do in my life. But a guy like me who's maybe like I've figured out my why and I've figured out kind of what I'm doing in my life, for those who are like, okay, I just want to sharpen the sword. Like I figured it out. I've got my Excalibur. I'm chopping through the issues in my life. I'm on my path. I know where I'm headed. What's some advice you'd give to like me that maybe is someone who's maybe a little bit further down the path, or maybe they've kind of got their core values figured out. They know where they're going in their life, so to speak, or they think they do, and they just need to get to that next gear. Because we all have like our own path and our own journey, and we all have our own, our own unique internal struggles. Yep. But what would you say to a guy like me and say, all right, Dave, you're in third, fourth gear. We need to get you in 5, 6.
Yep. What
were some of the things? How would you counsel me to have mental toughness in that regard? Like, what would you ask me to do?
I'd probably ask you what's something that you want to do that you haven't.
Okay.
And I would have you make a commitment that has a set period of time associated with it.
So I have like a clock counting down on me.
Yeah, there's a start, there's a middle, there's an end. And like, what are you going to do? Like, so now let's make a plan. We know the direction you want to go. What's the plan that you're going to do? And what are the changes that you got to do differently? We'd probably also talk about the habits and the things that because every time you try to create a new habit, you also have to get rid of at least one bad habit.
Yeah.
Right. And so we'd probably go down that path. But the first thing would just be, what's something you've always wanted to do that you haven't?
And that's an easy one. I mean, you asked me that. That was, whoa, I felt that. I was like, whoa. Because sometimes we don't, it's easy to be captain counselor when you've done a lot of things, but it's like, there's still a lot to unpack. All of us is like, you've never arrived. Like, it doesn't matter if you're the first white belt walking into the dojo or you're a 6-degree black belt in life. You're always on the journey. What are some of the things, I guess I would want, what I'd want to know, and something cool I've kind of always wanted to ask you is, what are some things in your personal life where it's like, kind of like you're this constructor of the mind, but then you also have to have a personal life with your wife and your kids, and you're a dad and you're a husband. And I know you've been through a lot. Like, you've been through some heavy stuff. I mean, you lost a son.
Yep.
And Griff, which is an amazing human being.
Yep.
I remember seeing him at the skate park for years. How has having these skill traits, someone who's gone through tragedy or where has mental toughness kicked in for you on a real personal level where you're like, whoa, this is something I'm glad I had as a tool in my shed to use when things get really, really heavy?
I think knowing yourself, right? And knowing what is helpful and what is not helpful. Because I think we all, when things are the absolute worst, we have a tendency to go somewhere, right? Like after Griff died, I just wanted to be alone, like all the time. But that wasn't helpful. And so one of the biggest things for me was actually stuff that I had done for years ahead of time, and it was establishing a community, like having people that showed up with meals and people calling and texting and checking in on me. Like, and if I didn't have that, like I would take a board and just go paddle. I wouldn't even surf. I'd just paddle straight out of the middle of the ocean, get as a load as possible.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, maybe part of like processing and just being on my own and kind of having that silence like we talked about. But at the same time, it definitely got to a point where it was like, I hate people, you know, like
Yeah.
It was more extreme and it was unhelpful. And so having developed a community, you know, if you don't have a community, like find one and don't think about it that much. Like if it means like, I don't know, starting jujitsu and joining like that community. If it means like, you know, with church and becoming more involved. If it's like,
Don't
you know,
recluse
at work, like find some community where you're going to have somebody who's like got your back.
Yeah.
But I think people think too much about it. Like, okay, well, I could do that, or I could do that. I could do that. Just pick one. Like roll
started.
dice, like, I don't know, write them all on a piece of paper and pull one out of a hat. And that's the one. Like, go do it. Maybe you can do multiple.
Right.
But like find people, connect with them. You know, I think for me that did so much to pull me out of that aloneness.
And it's almost like an idle time where if you're not careful, you can fall deeper and deeper and deeper into a recluse behavior of like lostness, like you're just lost in this abyss.
And I kept telling myself that that's what I needed. I kept telling myself like, oh no, like you had the worst thing in your life ever happen. So, you know, we need some time. And it just, I think, yes, I needed it for not as long as I went into it. You know, and I'm just grateful, like my wife, so good at seeing that, you know, talking to me, pulling me out of that, but then also just like friends and having people that knew me, that know that I'm not just this introvert who wants to be alone. Like that's not who I am.
Right. No, well, you've always been like a nice human being, like knowing you and your wife, knowing, you know, my wife and I, and we've known each other, but I think is focusing on being a good human being. And I think so that when something like that hits or tragedy hits, it's like you've done everything in your power to be a good human being. And that's a great, one of those things that values wise, maybe, you know, someone could write down and values, but yeah, I think one thing that helped in that, I think one of the reasons you did have a community around you is like, you're out here trying to be a good human being. And I think when something hits you, it's almost like it's a little bit, you're not, I don't like it when people are like, oh, I'm this Lone Ranger or I'm this, you're not. Like the impact that every human being has in this world is massive and can be massive. Yeah. And there's too many people that say, I want to go about it your alone. Because you bring up the community. It's like when you lost Griff, like I saw so many people like hooey around and from the paddle out to all the warm messages. I know Becky and I were out of town. But it was like, it was, I remember watching it kind of on social media, watching everything that was happening. And it was just like, you know, I mean, everyone got emotional. I mean, it was an emotional time. But it was cool to see so many people support you guys and the family through such a hard time. But like the caveat to that, I think is focusing on being a good human being. And I think that's definitely was in your guys' court as one thing that helped out with all that.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's also, I mean, Griff was awesome too. So I think he contributed to that, you know, and he had his disabilities and
but his smile like was so one thing, like I if I think of Griff, I just always see him smiling.
Yeah.
That was one thing, that beautiful smile.
He knew how to connect. Like, I mean, for people listening, he had a stroke when he was 4 and then lost a lot of his verbal communication, but yet he couldn't really talk, but yet he could connect to people.
Yeah.
And he knew, I don't know how many stories, hundreds of kids that, you know, at school and just people that like, I was having a hard time sitting by myself and Griff just came up to me and didn't try to do anything. You know, he was a goofy kid, but just sat with me.
And it was his presence.
And just like he knew when somebody was having a hard time and he would just like connect with them. And I think that's something that like most of us that can talk and can speak aren't very good at.
Well, I think that tells you too that the power of like body language and really being in tune with what's going on here. I mean, you figure Griff can't even articulate what he's feeling and thinking, yet he did the same thing to me. I remember being at the skate park one time, and I too was like, I was super bent out of shape because I was Simeon who's trying to do this move, and he was just totally irritating me because I was trying to get him to do a rock a fakie.
Yeah.
Griff looks over at me, and it was like he looked into my soul and was like, it was such a trip. He was like, it was almost like, Uncle, just let him have fun. It was weird. It was like he said nothing to me.
With the look.
Yeah, with a look. And it was like,
and he's a little tiny kid.
He's just a little kid. He looked back up at me, and it was like I got like this kind of came back to center moment with this kid that can't talk, and just so beautiful. It was like such a special moment. But
it's amazing though too how much you're able to do when you're having fun. Like, and most of the things that we're trying to do, like they're big, they all started in some level with fun. Right? Like sports, they're fun. Right. But yet we get so like aggro about stuff, and because we're not focused on the fun anymore, we're focused on getting a result.
Right.
But like people that get the results, they have more moments of enjoyment with what they're doing.
Yeah. So, so you're still doing the military thing and training, but you also, one thing was cool to see you is to run into you to door-to-door Kong, D2D.
Yep.
With Taggart's a program and all the people come at DoorCon. It was really, really cool to see you out there. So how have you been moving this mental toughness into sales? You know that I own a roofing company and I love teaching door knocking. It's like one of my favorite things is being able to conquer the door and conquer your fear of talking to someone for the first time and all those different aspects and measuring your numbers, measuring your emotions, measuring your goals, and how to do all this. So how has this going from working with Army Rangers and Navy SEALs to staying tough in an absolute gnarly battle-ready environment to a battle-ready environment on, knocking on a door and absolutely getting doors slammed in your face and trying to achieve mental toughness when it comes to sales?
You know, I don't know what I expected, like getting into it. And this all happened like around the same time, like after Griff died and it was COVID and all that. I'm like, okay, what's something else I can do? And it kind of just happened with people that I met. And it's not really any different. Like there's a voice in our head. It tells us stupid stuff that we can't do things and we're not worth it and all this. And it, the voice is unique for each of us.
Right.
and we just gotta quiet it. And so whether it's like military guy or a guy knocking, quieting that voice, and then going back to the alignment and control, right? Like, what is my trajectory? Am I currently aligned with that? If not, how do I get aligned, right? Do you know how to make the adjustments on the scope, right? Are they real tiny, subtle adjustments? Or am I pointing the weapon in the completely wrong direction?
Right.
And so there's the alignment aspect of make sure you're pointing in the right direction, but then there's control, right? Control of the thoughts, control of the emotions, right? Do I need to take a little time out? And then you can get into all the different physiological responses and maintaining control over that. But like, I think, the three simplest things as far as control is control your thoughts, your breath, and your eyes. If you can get those things under control, right, and you're aligned, then you'll know the next step, right? So if you're in sales, like, okay, go knock the next door, right?
Right. And be aware of, okay, I know I'm going to get a certain amount of this is going to happen today. Like, I think it's
for sure.
It's almost so easy for guys to get out and say, okay, I'm going to have the best day ever. And I love manifestation and getting in the zone and putting on Rocky and smashing a Red Bull. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to hit this neighborhood. I'm hitting this many doors, blah, blah, blah. But I think there's also a moment too that you have to prepare yourself for what's coming on the negative side. So when it gets there, it's not like I've tuned out, like, oh, I'm not going to look over there type of thing. But like, I knew this was coming and I created my actions or my thoughts before it hit. Yep. So I always ask is, what would you suggest of people being mentally prepared for the pitfalls? Right?
Yeah. Well, and I think manifest what you're going to do. Don't manifest like just what you want to happen. Like what you want to happen will occur when you manifest how you want to be, how you're going to show up. Right? So 100 doors and people are just slamming it in your face or not answering and whatnot. Like, manifest who you are. And I think yes, there is a place for manifesting what you want to accomplish.
Right.
People want a golden door, right? Reach a certain revenue, all that. That shouldn't be what you're manifesting like day in and day out, because it will get old. You need to manifest your values, your integrity, and how you're going to show up when it's hard and when it sucks, because you can do that, right? And there are going to be days that, like, I don't know, people just aren't home, or people, I don't know, sucky stuff's happening in their lives, and so they're not responsive, right? Every day is not going to be a huge day.
Yeah.
And I don't know, one of the quotes I share a lot is, I don't even know who said it. I think it's one of those, it's like attributed to like Abraham Lincoln, Winston Churchill, like all these people, but maybe none of them or all of them said it. But it's, success is moving from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm.
Right.
What would happen if that was your goal?
Yeah.
I'm going to go out there, regardless of how many deals I get, I'm going to move from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. Like, if you can do a whole day of that, your results are a byproduct of your actions, right?
Yeah.
And so you'll continue to move forward. You'll continue to progress. You'll get better. One of the biggest things I talk to guys about that are struggling when it comes to sales is growth. Like, forget about how people are going to respond. What actions are you going to take to get better at, right? So write one thing you want to get better at, and then list whatever the actions are, right? One I talk about a lot is, okay, if you want to get people off the doorstep, what are 3 things that you can do? Well, as I walk up to the door, I can find something in their yard to talk about.
Right.
I did that or I didn't. Step 2, I can maybe create a little bit of a distance and hand them something, right? So they have to kind of
come out
of the doorstep. I either did it or I did not, right? Then maybe some big body language as I turn around to show them the thing that I found in the yard that I wanted to point out. That's 3 things that you can do. Will they follow you? I don't know. The people that are going to follow you that, are interested will, right? Those that don't care, they're going to close the door either way. But at least you did those 3 things, and now you're better at it. And so you got more reps in, right? And so you pick one thing you want to get better at, and then whatever the actions are. And I would say like 1 to 3 actions.
Yeah,
don't make it a big laundry list. Just 1 to 3 things. And then at the end of that door, you either did those things or you didn't.
And you kept track of it. Yes, man, I love it. I love having you around. We could go for a long time, me and you, and talk about all this stuff. But I want to know is how can someone look into what you do? If you're gonna let us know, is there somewhere we can go look at you? I know I can put the link in. I'll have it. You can give me, the link. It'll be on our website and on the podcast. But where someone can go to learn a little bit more about Chris.
I think the easiest thing, Instagram, the Chris Pierce, you can find me on there. I'm not always the best at posting. This year has actually been really awesome because I partnered with another guy in the sales industry. His name's Corey Clark.
What's that company again?
So he's called The Sales Therapist.
Okay, so it's a sales therapist, and that's on Instagram, The Sales Therapist.
Yeah, so that's Corey, and then I'm just the Chris Pierce, and but I wore the shirt, The Collective. Okay. And so basically we've got this group of salespeople in all different industries that is a support group, but at the same time, there's a lot of high-level training to build mental toughness, build resilience, helping guys actually reach the goals that they have. And we do it in 50-person groups. Wow. So it's like kind of, more small, intimate. We're actually, just filling up the second group now. That's going to start in October.
Cool.
And so, they can find a link to that if they're interested on either mine or Corey's Instagram accounts. But
cool. Well, I really, really, really appreciate you coming out tonight. And
yeah, thank you.
It's good being having some good blood up here and up on the North Shore. Love been good to be neighbors, and also kind of in the similar industry. I've always enjoyed talking to you, so I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you having me.